Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of I Am Christina DiArcangelo. And today, everyone, I have an exciting guest on. Mike Watson has joined me today. He is also the co-author of Rise Up Leadership Habit for Turbulent Times. The reason why this is so important is because we have had such turbulent times as of lately in the world of the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we're still living in turbulent times. I really wanted to have Mike Watson on to be able to talk about leadership and some of the other things he's working on with us. So welcome, Mike. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, Christina, it's great to be on your show. Thanks so much for having me. What a gift LinkedIn can be to introduce us to like-minded people.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's how we met, everyone. We have not worked together on projects. A lot of times we have people on that I've worked with, either, currently past life things. But one of the things that I love about us as professionals and entrepreneurs and the ability to utilize LinkedIn for what it's worth, we were able to meet, and we have been kind of following each other now for, I don't know, I would say maybe since last year, I think. Yeah. And right. Okay, good. And so that's how I got introduced to Mike, and Mike got introduced to me because we also are writers for CEO World Magazine. So we share that as a bond. And we also, I think, share some of these leadership skill sets as well, because as you guys know that listen and watch us, I always try to talk about things that make us the same, the guests. So welcome, Mike. Why don't you just take it off from the top?
All right. Well, thanks so much, Christina. You'd asked me to share a little bit about the background and the passions that drive me. So in very abbreviated fashion, I was a banker and I escaped after 15 years from an executive role in banking. Great learning, but not designed for somebody whose creative temperament is greater than his analytical temperament. So moved out of banking and started this company, Ignite Management Services. And we started, Christina, as a strategy firm, helping organizations create and execute strategy using a mantra of strategy from within. So we go in, work with leaders to help them coalesce around where they're going and how they're going to get there. But we continue to come up against the same roadblock, and that's the execution roadblock. Mm-hmm. And organizations would get stumped, and it would almost always come back to leadership. It would come back to the way in which people were choosing to lead that got in the way of strategy. Ranjay Gulati from Harvard just wrote a great book called Deep Purpose. And in that book, Deep Purpose, it talks about having this strategy and the vision and the purpose that cascade through an organization. Well, that takes a different type of leadership and different from what we were seeing in the command and control style. So that's what led us down this path of leadership and ultimately to the book, but our practice, which is still has a strategic component, but more about how leadership individuals and teams embrace habits that are going to make them more effective in these turbulent times.
Mm-hmm. That is such an awesome idea that you guys came up with and that you took the time to do this, right? Because, a lot of people like to talk about these types of things, but they don't do anything about it, right? They want to talk about it and agree and maybe show up on Clubhouse or Instagram Live or something. But they don't do anything about it. You guys actually took the time and effort to write a book about this to try and help corporations and leaders understand how to do this properly, rather than being, command and control, like you put it, being a leader that actually listens to his or her team and is willing to recognize their shortcomings. Because listen, you and I are both, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and we don't know everything, Mike. And so
hang on, easy. Speak for yourself, Christina. No, kidding. No, carry on.
But you know what I'm saying? But what you just exhibited right there, hold on a second. That's how some leaders rule, right?
It is.
So I'm glad you did that, because I think it's important for people to understand these things, right? So that they hear it out loud, right? They can read it. But when they hear it, if they could hear themselves and how they talk to people, oh my goodness.
If only you could hear yourself talk. There's a little toolkit we occasionally bring into facilitations for some of the more challenged groups. And we bring it in and we, with great, sort of fanfare, and we put it on the desk, and they were wondering what's coming out. And out comes this little toy floating boat that would sit in a child's bathtub. The other is this ugly fly. And the third is a mirror. And the whole construct is this, is as leaders, we must understand the wake of our actions. And that's symbolic. The boat is symbolic of that. When we speak, when we act, there are ramifications that spread a long, long way. And some hit the shoreline gently with a ripple, and some crash and destroy. And as a leader, understanding the impact we have on people is critical. The fly in the wall is, do you hear yourself? What would a third party observer say about what's going on in this room today? And it's that, I know I did it for fun. Stop. But that's behavior we see. The hand gestures, put it up, the pointing like this, and it's unconscious and it happens. And if you were watching from the outside, you'd just go, ooh, what just happened? Stop that. It would destroy you to see it take place. And yet we do that on a continuous basis. The third is the mirror. We get occasionally asked to come in and help organizations do a culture assessment. And we find, I know there are lots of assessments that are out there, tools that are out there. We find it quite easy. We say, give us an hour and a half to observe your senior management team in a meeting, and we'll tell you what your culture will likely be. Because it's a mirror. The mirror is the mirror to the soul. And how, if you have challenges with culture and you're a senior leader, look in the mirror, because it starts with you. It always starts with you. And this gets into the type of leadership that we talk about. And I know, Christina, this is why we connected, why we started, we're aligned, is I saw some of your articles. I think, oh man, like this is the stuff we're talking about. And you did, I can't remember all the details of it, but you did a great post a while back on the service leader, the leader that leads with servitude. Tell me about that one. Remind me what that was about.
Thank you so much. So one of the things that, I'm a female CEO. So there's, and I've moved up the ranks. So a lot of times my bosses were all male. My whole career, and my job that I've had on the pharma side, because you're probably like, well, which job is it? The tech job, the nonprofit job? Which job are you talking about? When anybody asks me to introduce myself, I say I'm a clinical researcher by trade. That's what I've done the majority of my career. And so in my role in clinical research and outsourcing and procurement and such, when I first started, was most of the time I was a woman working in a man's role, and I reported to men primarily. So I've watched, over the years, some of these things that you just brought up, Mike, like the pointing and stuff, and like the behaviors that I have been, I don't know, I don't want to sound like abused by, but that's kind of how I felt. Like some of these people that I was working very closely with, it was almost like a form of abuse, the way that these people talk to you. And the way that I work, across all of my teams, and they're all different companies, but we all have one thing in common, again, is that we're patient-facing companies. We work to help patients, right? So all of my teams, that's one of the golden threads that we weave, is the fact that we're patient-focused. And so one of the things that I do for myself and my teams is I'm a service-oriented leader. I live by this every day in my personal life, in my spiritual life, and my professional life. So for me, it's like a trifecta for me to be a service-oriented leader, because it's who I am as a human. And so what I meant in that article, for people who are listening today and who may not understand what that means, is that I purposely and willfully try to make sure that I help my teams. I demonstrate that I do things to help them every day of whatever we're working on together. So if that means that there's something, okay, for example, we're working on building something else in the tech company in our enterprise for Spectral. So instead of giving my right hand, the paper, so to speak, and say, hey, okay, you start this out and send it back to me. No, I said, okay, I'm going to start this so that it'll be easier for you to add this in, when she was fully capable of doing it herself, right? First, and then passing it to me. But the reason why I'm doing this, Mike, is because one, this is really important for us to get this done. Two, I know better than anyone else on my team, right? Whether it's my EA who set up this podcast for us today to be able to shoot this, or it's my head of technology or head of whatever, I'm just like them. And so I want to make sure, and I may not have all their skills, of course, but what I'm trying to say is I'm here to serve them. What I do here in my role is what's going to impact them every day. And if I give service willingly and fully, both again, in my personal and professional life, doesn't that want to make them to also be the same and give back too? Because it makes everyone feel better when we give back, doesn't it, Mike? What do you think about this?
Honestly, I'm just sitting back saying, oh yeah. And I got to point out a couple of things, Christina. When you're talking, maybe it's your heritage, being Italian heritage, but you talk a lot with your hands.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but your description is often like this, and it's just a natural thing, and that's the heart shape.
Right.
And contrast the heart with the pointed finger, and you got to do it this way. It was really powerful for me to watch you do that and speak with your hands in this open gesture and this body language that if people take anything from this podcast as leaders, please understand that your body language is what people see and absorb much more than the words that you say. And so I had to point that out, call that out. It was really quite beautiful to see. There's another piece, the servant leaders in service. We talk a lot about it. It's what our book is really about. It's the definition of leadership, and then how you might change the way you behave in order to become that leader. And it's the old beliefs of leadership. And it doesn't take much looking at me to say that he's a mid-50s white guy. So how was he trained? Probably to be right, probably to tell people what to do, probably to leverage authority over followership, probably a little insecure, and so needing to show that he had it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we see in so many leaders. And I have a lot of empathy for them, Christina,
mm-hmm.
because they've been trained that way. And in my career, I came to what was nearly a crushing defeat at 37 years old. So, I mean, the ego at 55, at 37, it was massive. Like, it was massive, telling people what to do, always needed to be right. And I was at a financial services company, and my job as the chief operating officer was to transform the operations, the culture, and the strategy to be more customer centric. And I'd had a long history in banking, and I knew the industry well. So I was probably the right person technically for the job, but I didn't have the maturity, and I didn't have the empathy, and I didn't have the care. Anyway, so this strategy, we created it. And to this day, I'll say it was one of the better strategies I have seen in terms of understanding the market, positioning the organization against its strengths, all these strategic elements. And we launched. But just before we launched, we took it to the board of directors that were so pleased. They applauded. When does a board of directors applaud? This is what we needed all this time. They said, so imagine me, walking around, big puffy chest, and we launched. And month one comes up and the results come in. Every conceivable category was a downtick. Financial margin, fee income, customer satisfaction, employee engagement, down. Oh, okay, no. So that's month one, but we all know the change curve. This is, right. Imagine me rationalizing this in my silly little brain. Oh, it's a change curve. It just takes time for people to so month two, All the metrics down, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, and we are down significantly in every major category. And now I have failed. Like, let's call it out. I know in my heart I failed. So I talked to a leader in the HR group in the organization that I really trusted, and she was so wise. And I said, "What's happening? What's going on?" And she looked at me with great empathy and she said, "Come on, Mike, you know." I said, "No." I said, "I don't know." And I might have thrown a few 4-letter words out there. I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Sure you do." I said, "You got to tell me, like, help." And she said, "Mike, they can't stand you. You're a bully. You go in telling people what to do. You go in there, they come to you with ideas and you're never satisfied. You've got to show them that your idea is better than theirs. You don't respect them. You've done nothing to build trust." And I guess she'd been waiting a while to tell me this, Christine, because she laid it out. And honestly, I wept in her office. I wept. It was the most crushing blow of my career. And that really was what I owe her to this day, because that started my transformation as a leader, to understand that humanistic leadership is really, and service-based leadership. So she said I said, "What do I do? What do I do?" And she said, she said, "You know that office up in such and such where we've had all that tension?" She says, "You know they don't like you." I said, "Well, yeah, I know there's tension there." She said, "I want you to buy a box of donuts and go up into their lunchroom, actually 2 boxes, and sit in their lunchroom from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. and engage every single person that comes in the room. And you can talk to them about absolutely anything except the work we do."
Yep.
I had forgotten how. I had forgotten how. I didn't know how to engage in, tell me about your kids, tell me about your family, what matters to you, what's important to you in life. I believed that everyone was there for this common purpose of making money for the company, and how naive, how stupid I was. So that exercise was such an eye-opener. And the gift I will always value from her was that she knew that in my heart I was a good person. My behavior was not good, but in my heart I was a good person. And she gave me that opportunity to bring my heart forward. This, let's talk about it this way. The second piece was fairly easy. I stood in front of my group of senior leaders and apologized. I said, "I'm sorry. I've been telling everybody what to do. I've dismissed the years of experience you have around this table, the 200 years of experience that resides around this table. And I said, I've insulted you. So let's start again." And very symbolically, I stood there with my beloved strategy in hand and I started to rip it like this. And one of the gentlemen in the back, dear Andy Salentic, he looked at me and he said, Mikey, he says, whoa. You don't have to tear it up. We just got to tweak it a little. So that day I handed it over to the team. Christina, they turned it around, and it's gone from me to they and we. They turned it around. They owned it. The results were transformational. 10 years later, I was sitting in an airport reading the national business newspaper in Canada, and there was a full-page story on this organization that had quadrupled in size in the 10 years since I had been gone. And the vision hadn't changed. The core elements hadn't changed, but the people owned the strategy. They really owned it, and they were passionately committed to it. And I had nothing to do with it, okay? Except the joy of knowing that I had a bit of influence way early on. But it's a long story about these behaviors we instill that are instilled in us. We have to confront them. Yep. And when we confront them, we have to accept in ourselves forgiveness. Forgive yourself. You do care. You are good. And then take active steps. And I'm going to come back to what you said and turn it back to you. I purposefully and willfully serve.
Yes.
You made a decision. You made a decision to purposely and willfully serve. How do you do that?
Well, I was blessed because my dad, I grew up blue collar, my backstory. And so my dad, and, working in the blue collar industries, both steel mill and then the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission, he was there to serve his members because he was very predominant in the union. So he was president of the Steelworkers Union for Phoenix Steel. And then he became a Teamster on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And so his job was to serve the members. That was besides him doing his everyday, job, whatever it was, driving a big dump truck or whatever. And so I grew up watching this my whole, childhood and into my early 20s and things like that. And as a kid, I was very much a service-centered person. Like I helped the elderly people out in our, in our home environment, in our family and things like that, my own parents. So I was always that person. So when it came to work for me, I always wanted, like in my role, I've always done that. Like what I do as a leader, I've always done it. I've always been, I can help you with that. Would you like me to help you? If you've got it, it's fine, but I can help you if you'd like me to help you. Like I've been like this my whole life. And so I didn't even know that that's what it was called, Mike. And, I have one of my degrees is in organizational management, but I mean, that was years ago. I got that one.
Yeah.
And they didn't call it that, so I didn't even know I was doing what I was doing until I had some time to really reflect on it. And then even when you said that, like, yes, I talk with my hands all the time, but you're the first one. Sorry, I pointed at you like that, but I didn't mean to, but you were the first one who's ever said to me the heart thing. And what's cool is you're right. I do. I think about things from my heart. I try to connect mind and heart together when I work all the time. But my logo, as you know, for CD is a heart. So now that you just said that to me, I'm going to give it back to my team and say, guys, I never realized this about myself. I was on with Mike Watson because they obviously know who you are. And he brought this up. That was so cool for you to tell me that because I never even realized that. But see, it goes back again to what you do for corporations. Like you came in today for this podcast. I had no idea you were going to tell me that. And look at that. I learned something about myself. Now, thank God it was something good, Mike.
Oh man, that reminds me of a time because tough conversations still have to be had.
Yes.
What I find is sometimes this construct of service-based leadership or humble, inquisitive, trust-based leadership gets a bad rap because we say how do you get anything done? And tough conversations still need to be had. Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, so good talking about that. But I remember one time I was working with an organization, it was actually in your sector, and they were having some challenges. It was a drug research and development company, and they'd done some great things, but they were starting to have some real tensions that exist. So the CEO had great courage, and she said, help me understand what's going on in this office. And so I did, and I interviewed all these people, and taking a page out of this HR leader's book in the conversation she had had with me, it's now debrief time with the CEO.
Yeah.
And I said, it's a bit kind of awkward to present this to you. And I said, it's actually odd for me because I know you well and I know how caring you are. But I can tell you it's not coming across to your people. And they see a different side of you. So can we spend a bit of time exploring how that perception is created? And it was a pretty tough message. It was the message of your people don't like you very much. Right. But delivered with care, we can still deliver the tough messages.
It's interesting that you brought this up because we didn't talk about this before we spoke about you coming on the podcast, but I just released another article about working in the biotech industry for CEO World that came out yesterday, and how CEOs in the biotech industry need to, there was 3 tips, but one of them was being empathetic. Listen, we have lots of deadlines, and I understand where that CEO was coming from, right? Because I have a biotech company as well, not only the research side of, all these companies, they're all separate, I get it. Like, I understand time, you got to get the stuff, you got to hit it. You have stockholders, you have to make sure that you keep them happy. I get it. But at the end of the day, we have to remember who we are as a human, right? Like today, I didn't wear a suit to come on here. And, normally I would be in a nice, but no, this is who I am. Some days I feel like wearing a Nike outfit. Some days I might want to, that's just who I am as a person. I don't worry anymore about perception as a CEO. I don't care. Meaning if I come with a Nike outfit on, it's my heart and my brain that show you who I am.
It's how you show up.
Yeah.
It's every day how we show up. And most of the leaders we interact with are of goodwill. There are the occasional ones we meet that have personality disorders or challenges. And that it's true. I mean, they do. We devote a little bit of the book to people that suffer from personality disorders, narcissism, sociopathy. These things do exist. But for the most part, people are good. And this is what we talk about in Rise Up, is how to help leaders help themselves to be the best versions of themselves. And our definition of leadership, very simply, enabling people individually and collectively to be the best versions of themselves in pursuit of something noble. If that's not about the job title, the authority, the power, the decision-making, the chess game, the allocation of capital that comes with it, that's the job description. Leader isn't an automatic with your job description. Leadership is something you demonstrate in how you do that job. And if you're enabling people individually and collectively to be the best of themselves in pursuit of something noble, you'll never have a succession issue. I was working this morning with the CEO of a very, very large global company, and she's just come in as the CEO, and they've got a succession challenge. And then she describes the leadership practices that she has inherited. Command and control, well, it's not a surprise. So the antidote to succession issues is humanistic leadership, enabling people to be the best of themselves. And what we talk about is this, Christina, it's easy to be willing to change. My results in that old financial institution weren't very good. I need to change. But change is hard, especially when I have to change. I can talk about other people changing, but when I have to change, it's hard. So willingness to change is a condition, but motivation to change is the true enabler. Why? Why am I choosing to do this?
I had no idea that I make a heart hand motion when I make my hand motions, because I try not to make too many of them on the podcast because it's distracting. And so for you to pick up on that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, Christine, it speaks volumes about who you are. I mean, some things we can't hide. When we lead from the heart, it comes out, and it was just coming out in the way you were talking.
Well, I appreciate you noticing that, especially since my logo has a heart in it, ironically. And, the whole brand is about, being heart-centered and creating freedom for others. So I really appreciate that. And I swear we didn't even script that. That just came right out.
That was a happy accident indeed.
It sure was. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for joining me today and talking about all the variances of leadership, service-centered leadership, all of the work that you've done over the years, the lessons that you have learned, and all the things that you've done to help others be successful in their roles.
Oh, Christina, it was such a pleasure spending time with you, and this sharing the energy of somebody that is so passionate about leading with care and bringing that to her day-to-day life. Thank you for making it available to others.
Well, thank you, Mike. I really appreciate you. And like what we always say in every single one of our recordings, remember, we are the same. I am Christina DiArcangelo. Thank you for joining me today.